is the most sensational piece of BS you've heard a compulsive liar come out with? Story 1, I generally don't talk about getting little sleep because invariably one person I tell will have gotten less sleep. However, one night, I hadn't been able to sleep at all. To know why, laid in bed for about 3 hours before realizing it was a lost cause. I figured I was pretty safe complaining about it. This one girl, whom tended to get on my nerve a lot, says so. I haven't slept in a month, there was a PASU, and I say no, that's not true, no, I really haven't, no, the world record for going without sleep is about 11 days, and the guy was going crazy about 4 days in. Well, I might have slept a little bit, yeah, you did. Usually I don't go off on people, but the combination of this person, the pettiness and degree of the lie, and the fact that I had not slept set me off slightly. Story 2, this guy I used to work with said he was 31, which is fine. He then went on to say that he fought in Desert Storm, which ended in 91. Instead of calling him out on his obvious lie, I asked him about his military service. He went on to say that he was a 3rd LT. In the Army, the rank doesn't exist, and that he had no college degree. LT ranks are usually only given to people with college degrees. He said that after the war was officially over, the Army sent him to the Air Force because the AF wanted him as an F-22 pilot. By this point, I was just outraged at his disrespect for the military in general and called him out in front of a bunch of people. I left out a word, second edit, realized the war ended in 91, not 95. I've been caught in a lie. Story 3, sophomore year in college, one of my roommates had a few friends from his high school come a party for the weekend. I was playing COD when they walked in, and one guy asked if he could join. As we play, he tells me that he's in the Marines. In his second year, quickly shows me his dog tags, says he was on leave from Afghanistan. His squad was sent into a hostile town, and one of his best friends got his leg blown off by an IED. Killed instantly, he ran to cover and began returning fire on 3 hooded figures. He killed 2, but lost track of 1. Suddenly, he was hit in the back of the head. At this point, he starts crying, not like a single tear, but straight up bawling. I should note that just he and I are in the room. My roommate was showing his other friends around. He says that lying on the ground, he quickly grabbed a knife out of pocket, jumped up, and stabbed his assailant in the face. I had long ago left the COD lobby and was staring in utter shock. He come over to me, embraces me, a guy he just met, and through his tears and sobbing tells me that the man he killed was only a child, 12 or 13. He excuses himself to the bathroom, and I didn't see him the rest of his visit. He left that night. He couldn't drink because he was being redeployed the next day. At lunch, I tell my roommate how shocked I was and how much I respected the guy. Wish that I had thanked, comforted him better, but was too taken aback to react. My roommate starts dying laughing and says, oh, that's just, well, call him Johnny. Dude loves to with people. Turns out he was a freshman at a nearby university in an ROTC program. TLDR, my roommate's friend lied about stabbing a 12-year-old gorilla in Afghanistan, faked a waterfall of tears, literally crying on my shoulder, just because he could. Story 4, not really sensational, but our group of friends growing up had a compulsive liar. Decent guy otherwise, but always constantly telling lies. Whether he needed to or not, he once tried to tell us he'd spent 3 months in rehab for a cocaine addiction. He grew up with us. We spent almost all of our time together. How could he possibly think we'd believe that? Story 5, had an acquaintance a couple years back who told a whole pile of BS, including, but not limited to, a best friend who faked his death twice. The same best friend was also a genetically enhanced test tube baby with the ability to infiltrate any location at any time with a handgun under his belt. Also, undying loyalty. A 61 Swedish blonde ex with millions of dollars that he just had to keep saying no to. She then died, but her twin sister didn't and wanted him badly. Did I mention they were also genetically enhanced super babies? A group of himself and 4 friends made a habit out of destroying lives for inconsequential grudges, even supposedly manipulating 3 people in a suicide and 1 in a murdering another, and he communed with demons once, ghosts twice. For clarity, this guy is the spitting image of McLovin and answers phones for an internet domain hosting site. If that doesn't scream hardened, I'm not sure what does. Story 6, had a friend say he sat in a tree for a day and waited for a moose to walk under him. When one finally did, he jumped out of the tree onto its back and killed it with a few stabs from a Swiss Army knife. He then proceeded to carry it home 10 miles on his back. Story 7, I used to walk home with 2 phenomenal bullshitters. One of them claimed Darren Fletcher, man, United footballer, spent Christmas Day at his house, despite living on the other side of the country. He also claimed that his mother was going to adopt his best friend, who was like a brother to him. The boy in question being a super hard, but really nice boy who had grown up in poverty. He didn't even exist. Another fantastic lie came from someone I went to school with who claimed he lived in a huge mansion. One of my friends lived next door to him, which kind of exposed the whole thing. Edit the Darren Fletcher guy also told a few people that he was given the use of his nan's holiday home in Spain for the summer, and he could bring as many people as he wanted. It got to the point where one of the people going had his dad about to buy flight tickets, until he said he'd take care of it. A few days later, one of the people going asked the liar's mom about the trip. She nothing of it, and explained how every detail was pure gravy of the worst kind. Story 8, some guy that used to bartend at my buddy's bar had tons of them. When he was in high school, even though he never played football, when his school's team was about to play in the state championship game, the coach offered him money to play for that game. He also said he could do a standing front flip over the bar and a backflip back over it. He supposedly had to start shaving when he was 10 because he could grow a full beard. And on. My buddy had to fire him because people stopped coming in when he worked due to his insane bullshit stories. Story 9. There's a kid in my English class who constantly says he's high as, dude, he basically just sits there shouting about how high he is and how he just wants to go blaze 8J with his girl, man. He also jokes about how helpful weed is to him and how it makes him smart. He drags the class average grade down 5 points every time there's a test. Also constantly says he's high on LSD as well. Mind you, this is the richest kid at an upper-class private school. This kid is a compulsive liar and really sucks at it. Story 10. This wannabe gangster kid told everyone at school that he had gotten shot a few times the night before in a gang shootout. I guess he wanted everyone to believe that he had just recovered really fast. Story 11. Went on a trip with some people, one of which was a whiny liar. By the end, she was a vegan eco-terrorist lesbian with 2 boyfriends. Her dad's unemployed, mother an alcoholic, grew up in poverty. She's semi-homeless. She's been to jail twice, never graduated high school, and her unemployed dad is a great investor and paid a lot of money for her to get into college. Also, eating meat is worse for you than smoking. And vegans are persecuted. Needless to say, nobody really liked her at all. Story 12. My fiance's friend is such a compulsive liar. Before he met his internet girlfriend, now his fiancée, IRL, he claimed to have gone to so many parties where he drank a whole case of 24 beer, and at one party, girls were using him as a striper pole, claimed to have participated in orgies, all of this at the age of 17. I finally told his fiancée about it last year, since he claimed this all went down at the beginning of their online relationship. She replied by telling me she was most definitely and quite obviously his first. Story 13. There was this kid in my high school who every chance he got would brag about how he was rich. He would lie about him having an expensive car at age 18 and how he was going to take over his dad's non-existent company. When he graduated, he ended up going to some NASCAR tech school and dropping out. He now works at CVS. Story 14. Made a throwaway for this one. I met this girl Jessica my freshman year of college. She seemed nice at first, but as time went on, another friend asked me if I had ever doubted the truth in some of Jessica's statements. Here are just a few. Pete Wentz, the bass player of Fall Out Boy, gave her mono when she got her first kiss from him. Her first boyfriend was in a coma for 2 years, and when he came to, she had to explain to him everything that had happened during his illness. She got pregnant while with her second boyfriend and lied on the forms for her wisdom teeth removal, thus resulting in a miscarriage caused by the anesthesia. Woke up covered in blood, and there were no ensuing medical tests. Kid Cudi was her babysitter. Her younger brother, sophomore in high school at the time, got caught with half a kilo of cocaine on 2 occasions, one in school selling to other kids, and another time speeding through a construction zone at 75 miles per hour. There was no expulsion or legal action taken by the school or the state. Her boyfriend got offered a $500,000 salary job from the CIA. Oh, he's also a Kennedy, but his mom isn't included in the lineage. She pushed Lil Wayne into a pool at a high school party. She fell asleep in Napoleon Bonaparte's bed while in a French museum. Steve Madden named those tan boots with a red zipper down the back after her. She's best friends with Machine Gun Kelly, as well Larry Bird's daughter. Bam Margera picked her up while she was working as a hostess in Cleveland. She was 17 at the time and went home with him to hang out with a crew of. She's in a music video, but the rapper is unknown and it hasn't been released after a year in production. She has slept with 27 men, but told her Kennedy boyfriend that there have only been 3. Her uncle is apparently in the mafia and can get her and all of her friends jobs in the alcohol distribution business, and claimed that they all helped her move into the dorms. My friend was there. There were no members of the mafia present. Dr. Phil called her house and asked her family to come on his show for an interview about crazy daughters. Apparently, slept with Swayze during freshman orientation. I don't know why she picks such random famous people. In case this doesn't put her crazy in perspective, last night she spent half an hour telling her roommate about how she's ready to have a child with her Kennedy boyfriend. This is also scary because at her nannying job over the summer, she force-fed the kids Benadryl so they would fall asleep because she was too hungover to deal. Edit grammar. Yet the intelligence service concludes that Iraq has chemical and biological weapons, that Saddam has continued to produce them, that he has existing and active military plans for the use of chemical and biological weapons, which could be activated within 45 minutes, including against his own Shia population, and that he is actively trying to acquire nuclear weapons capability. Tony Blair, 2002. Story 15. A former classmate of mine in law school was mentally unbalanced on many levels, and often lied compulsively even in the face of obvious evidence to the contrary. The one I found most disturbing was when she convinced her out-of-town mother that she had a boyfriend. He had a whole backstory, fake pictures, etc., for months. Then, to keep her mother from coming to visit one weekend, she convinced her that she couldn't come because her boyfriend had died in a horrible car wreck. For months afterwards, she held it over her mother's head, with guilt-tripping lines like, "How can you bother me right now, when I am in such a sensitive emotional place?" And weird things like that. I always felt like it was such a dark, creepy thing to convince your own mother of. And now she's a lawyer, representing all you fine folks. Story 16. My ex lived with a compulsive bullshitter. His most outrageous lie was probably when he told us his dad had been killed in the Falklands War conflict that started and finished in 1982. This guy was born in 85. I know, it's possible to freeze, but there were less than 300 British deaths in the conflict, so it was pretty easy to check that the name he told us wasn't on it. He later told everyone that had joined the army, bought some camouflage gear from a market stall, and roamed aimlessly around town all day. Last I heard of him was when he appeared in a national paper after having got a job at a funeral parlor by pretending to be a qualified embalmer, then filming himself waving severed heads around. Another one, a friend of a friend from college, told everyone about her Canadian model boyfriend. As evidence, we were shown pictures cut out of magazines, not even all of the same model. The bullshit peaked when she started gloating about how she had spent Christmas with him in Montreal, where they went skinny dipping and had in a river. Yeah, in a river in the middle of winter in Montreal. Story 17. When I was a kid, I would lie a ton to get attention. Whether it was the attention of my friends, parents, or teachers. I loved it. In retrospect, it was pretty lame, but at the time it felt like the only way I could get that attention from the people around me. I faked having pains in my stomach for a few weeks before my mom finally took me to the doctor, who sent me to have an ultrasound, as he had no idea what the pains were. It's very hard nowadays to diagnose imaginary pains. I told my friends at school that I had an ultrasound because I swallowed an ice cube whole, and it was freezing the inside of my stomach and the surrounding organs. They believed me. Which of us was more stupid? Yeesh. Story 18. I have a friend who always makes up the stupidest and tells people. Recently, he told me he does school assignments for drug dealers, and they pay him $100 per assignment. Another time he told me he was at a restaurant with some band playing, and he started booing them because he thought the guitar players sucked. He then claimed the guitar player stopped the band and called him out saying, "You think you can do any better?" And he responded by getting on stage and slamming down some wicked riffs. After all this, he then said people at the restaurant started clapping and the guitar player started crying. He's 19 now, and he's told me both of these stories within 2 months ago. Edit words. Story 19. I had a friend who told me she was abused as a kid by her stepdad who then died, that both her parents were dead, and she was adopted and had anorexia. Thing is, I was abused as a kid, so I took it all very seriously and made sure she was in therapy. Then we had a school concert, and her family were there, and they're all spitting images of each other. And also, she isn't anywhere near thin enough to be anorexic and ate pretty normally, with no signs of bulimia. Oh. And she had been pregnant several times and also addicted to heroin, but had no track marks because it wasn't the kind of heroin you inject. I feel mostly pity for her now. She's fine in school, is keeping a good eye on her if you're worried. Story 20. I was friends with a compulsive liar in high school. He never lied about anything that would affect other people. It was all about himself, so we humored him and let him tell his tales. Here's some of the more entertaining lies. A couple months after lending him some Love Hina manga, he started writing random Japanese characters in class, so that when people asked what he was doing, he could tell them that he was practicing his Japanese so that he could go to Tokyo University. At one point, he even brought in an application form to show off. I forget if he ever got around to accepting himself. For a while, he claimed to work part-time for a local branch of Square developing the new Final Fantasy games. When he saw me making dungeon maps for a DD campaign I was working on, he asked if he could have some to pass on to the design department. I handed him some of my old maps and have no idea what he actually did with them. Occasionally, he would mention that he was a black belt in kendo and go on about the competitions his team had won. One day, he even brought in a small photo album to back up his claims. He handed it to me and said it was from the last tournament he had been in. His team won, obviously. I quickly noticed that something seemed off about the photos. Not Photoshop, just something odd about them. After a few more, I realized that you couldn't see anyone's faces in any of the pictures. In every single one, the people had their helmets on. Even the people in the background were so blurred by the camera focus that you couldn't even identify their race. There were no team logos, no visible name tags, nothing that could be used to identify the people, when or where these pictures were even taken. He must have spent hours digging through albums of kendo matches on the internet before he could find enough usable pictures. He even spent the money to get them printed. Last I heard, he had joined the Navy. Not sure what he does, but if you ask him, he'll tell you that he's the guy who plans the missions for the SEALs. Story 21, I knew a guy in high school cut off all the sleeves of his shirts because his doctor had told him his arms were too muscular and were cutting off circulation. He also claimed to have been attacked by a bear cub. It made the local news. It turns out he had just scratched his own torso with his hands. My dad was the police officer who had to investigate. Before the story had made the news, he told me that the kid was full of and asked if he had a lying problem. Story 22, in 5th grade. A kid in my class claimed that he had a copy of Donkey Kong Country for Sega Genesis. He said his dad was able to get it because he was really rich and well-connected. He kept telling me that I could borrow the game, but kept forgetting to bring it to school. It took me a few months to realize that he was lying. Story 23, one of my roommates in college was a compulsive liar. I heard so many stories from him about how his father owns a castle in Ireland, and he has many Irish brothers and sisters that live there. He also told me that he bought something along the lines of 1,000 worth of dinar, because he was going to trade it in for 26 million. And he said he did. Then he told me he was going to fly all of our friends to Hawaii for spring break 2 years ago, but something came up, and he couldn't go. His name is Cash, ironically. Another thing was he said he paid a mortgage, 2 car payments, insurance, and everything else like that while his mother was in prison and he was in high school. He dropped out of college because he had no money and couldn't pay for it. Story 24, a kid that lived across the street from us in the early 1990s claimed that he had a subscription to Super Nintendo Power magazine. He refused to show me any issues of this magazine because his mom had thrown them out. I called him a liar, and he punched me in the face. Story 25, please. This must make the front page. I need a book to read. Edit, no, seriously. I want to read like 2,000 comments of this edit. My wish came true. I love you all. Story 26, I once thought someone was lying to me who turned out to be telling the truth about his exceptional military service record because so many guys are, well, full of, and I'd been dating psychopath a few months prior, so I was incredibly cautious. Everything checked out and married to him now. Story 27, my best friend in high school passed away from a rare type of cancer. Another friend of mine hated him before he got sick and would always try to convince me to stay away from him. After he died, she was suddenly destroyed, pretending as if his death was her own personal loss. I stopped speaking to her because of this, and in an effort to regain my friendship through sympathy, she fabricated her own friend that just so happened to also be suffering from the same type of rare lymphoma that my friend has passed from. She reached out to me, pleading for someone to comfort her since I knew exactly how she was feeling. As if her lie wasn't more blatant, she convinced everyone that her sick friend had been her best friend since she was in elementary school, but that he lived in Arizona. However, I'd known her since we were 16 months old and was quite certain this person did not exist, as were her parents. I ignored her pleas and continued to keep her out of my life to this day. Story 28, one of my teachers once told my class that PVC windows are called that because the frames are made of polyvinyl and they put chlorine between the 2 sheets of glass. He wasn't even joking. Story 29, one of my cousins told my mom and friends I died in a car accident. I was hit by a Mack truck and my door impaled my chest, causing me to bleed out in the helicopter. He got a black eye the next day. Story 30, my best friend's ex was out of town for like 3 days and no one had heard from her. She comes back, and when he asked where she had been, she informs him that her Tai Chi master had taken her for mountain training. We live in Texas. Not many mountains, and she had to fight bears while out there. With her Tai Chi, she was serious. Story 31, all the same guy. Claimed he was a manager at work and would give us all raises. He was later fired for this. Anytime he saw you with something like an energy drink, he would go on about how he invested all his money in that company. Claimed because of an encryption program he wrote, he cannot be arrested for anything in the United States. Claimed he was kicked out of Washington State for unstated reasons. Claimed he worked for a bunch of big companies at the same time he didn't, and carried around expired badges from places like Microsoft and Boeing. Claimed he spent $3,000 a week on gifts for his wife. Claimed every weekend he flew all over the U.S. for parties, which usually ended up in Vegas or the mansion. He had a few iPhones without SIM cards and would set the alarm to go off to sound like a call. He was the biggest self-aggrandizing douchebag I have met. And if you were having a conversation with someone else, he had to butt in and turn the conversation around to him and one up everything. I have a friend of a friend that is constantly coming up with the most ridiculous stories. This guy was gone for 2 years to be in the Coast Guard, and after he returned, we went on a camping trip to celebrate. These are some of the gems he came up with while we were drinking one night around the fire. He was a member of a top-secret covert operations group similar to SEAL Team 6 in the Coast Guard. In training, they made him shoot some drug smugglers they'd captured to prove he wasn't afraid to kill. During a pursuit of a drug-smuggling boat, head hung from a rope ladder of a helicopter, shooting at the smugglers with his assault rifle in one hand. There was more, but like I said, we were drinking. Needless to say, we refused to take anything he says seriously since then. Story 32, my little brother's friend, is an extreme liar. I've heard him say a number of things, from him going hunting for giraffe in the jungle to him being able to run a 3-minute mile. He is 12. Story 33, oh God. I wrote one story, but totally forgot about the best one. Different guy. This guy was actually the butt of a lot of jokes. We're pretty sure this guy had Asperger's, but high-functioning. He was the most cocky and arrogant person you will ever meet. His name was Nick. He had a real last name, but he insisted everyone call him Nick Shades. Apart from these stories, which were his deepest, darkest secret, that he only told a few people, and the arrogance. Most people thought he was just a regular, if slightly odd, guy. I had the pleasure of living with him for a year and a half. It may help to explain this all if I tell you. In the entire time he lived with me, the only live-action thing he watched was Donnie Darko. Other than that, the only things this guy watched or read were anime, manga, and comics. Now, the one story I will say first is actually the one we believe, because it explains the rest. Supposedly, when he was 13, he had his first girlfriend and was madly in love with her. She lived in a bad neighborhood, and one day, there was a knock at her door. She answered the door, and a crackhead demanded money from her. She refused, so he shot her dead on the spot. We, my old group of friends, have no proof of this. There was never any kind of news article we could find, but we choose to believe it because that's the kind of trauma that can cause an already up 13-year-old boy to retreat into this bizarre comic book fantasy world that he would tell us stories about. The scary thing about these stories is when he told them, you could tell he genuinely believed them to be true. He wasn't trying to pull one over on you. I swear on my life, this guy tells this story. I am not making up a single iota of it. This is the he claims. It's been 10 years, so I don't remember all the details. But basically, he claimed that from the age of 10 to about 16, he was a mercenary on the streets in a big secret shadow war between the street mercs and the corporate mercs. In our hometown, Toledo, Ohio, they would fight in the streets, alleys, and in the sewers. Sound like a comic book, yet it gets worse. He is a rail-thin, gaunt skeleton of a man. He claims that at that age, he was small and nimble enough that his weapons were blades strapped to his wrists like Wolverine, only single blades, and that he could run on all fours on the tips of his blades, never mind the damage that would do to a blade. His partner was a 400-pound black man whose street name was Donut, because he wore a spare tire around his neck on a chain. He was light enough that Donut could pick him up one-handed and hurl him at their enemies. See Wolverine Colossus Fastball Special. Apparently, at some point, Donut died in battle. And when he tells you this story, he gets genuinely choked up. My favorite addendum to this was when a friend who knew this guy didn't believe me. So one night at a coffee shop, he and Nick were alone, and he said, okay, so Tom told me something, and I have to know if it's true. He says you told him that you were a street mercenary when you were a teenager, fighting corporate mercenaries, and insert the rest of the story here. Nick got pissed. He was furious, spouting, I cannot believe he told you that. That's bullshit. Why would he say that kind of thing? It's just insulting. And just when my friend thought I was full of, Nick goes, I fought for the corporate mercs against the street mercs. How dare Tom claim that I was one of those street trash? The next night, my group of friends and I were all sitting in the coffee shop. And this friend came running in, yelling, oh my God, it's true. Tom's not kidding. Nick really does claim all of this bullshit. Holy, and proceeded to tell us the whole story. Story 34, my ex-friend is a compulsive liar. I could go on all day, but the most sensationalist stories were always ones involving females, like the time he went to NYC in high school and had a threesome with a couple of sisters. Yeah, okay. Story 35, someone I met once at university, age 20-ish, during a house party, claimed to own 10 houses and said I could call up the uni accommodation office to check up on it. Also, he claimed to have been a sniper in Iraq and would show people images of people he had killed on his phone. He was a manipulative, and I heard a few months later his family had staged an intervention. Edit grammar. Story 36. I spent Thanksgiving with a family of compulsive liars 1 year. We're descendants of one of the original Thanksgiving creators. Hey Race, a paperback novel with a picture of our great relative. Doesn't he look exactly like my friend? How lovely. Too bad you never learned how to cook anything for yourselves and needed me to do everything, including timing the microwave on your frozen 4-course meal, pass the salt, Please, elementary school taught me that the Native Americans instructed your ancestor how to grow your own food, including cooking it, so you wouldn't freeze to death in winter. Or did you not bother to learn anything before slaughtering them? Story 37 knew a girl who lied about having a boyfriend named Baptiste. She made him a MySpace profile with all these pictures of Robert Pattinson. I pretended to go along with it because I felt bad for her, but then she pelted me with wet sponges, so I called bullshit on her, hit me with sponges, and ill hit you with the truth. Story 38, I had a friend that was a one-upper. Any story that a person told around him, he would one-up by saying, well, one of my cousins did this insert bullshit statement here. He told me once that his cousin blew up his dad's car with fireworks. I had just told him about the 2 firecrackers I had back at my house. Story 39, I had a boss who would lie about everything. He'd tell me he was drinking coffee when I watched him pour water in his cup. Every single word out of his mouth was some level of a lie, big or small. Some favorites over the years, his father was the president of U.S. Steel. He had written secretariat. He spoke fluent Japanese. He once beat up a mugger and made him call the cops on himself. His parents married when they were 16 and were both doctors. He told us he wasn't married when he was. My favorite, though, was an elaborate tale he spun over the course of a month or more of meeting this woman and having this relationship. This happens not long after he has left the company fired for lies, among other things, but some of my coworkers kept in touch with him. The story goes on. He proposes, then marries her. He goes into detail about the wedding that happened outside on a hill at sunset, etc., etc. Then later someone asks him in front of those of us who heard that he had just been married if he was married. He says no, he's not married. He isn't even dating. We call him on it. Things end badly. Nobody has heard from him since. Story 40 had a boyfriend once who, when we first started dating, said that he was in a screamo band that toured all over the U.S., and he was the singer and guitarist. I was 13 at the time, so that meant that he was like 10 when he did this. When I asked him to play guitar, he could not play a single chord. He said that he could only play electric, and it had to be fast. I asked if his family knew, and he said they didn't. So I was supposed to believe that a 10-year-old child was touring all over the U.S. in a screamo band, and his parents didn't give 2 shits. To this day, he still stands by this story. He is in his 20s. Story 41, a girl I knew in high school was all sorts of crazy, especially when it came to dating guys. You'll probably know the type. Well, about a year after we had graduated, I am browsing her Facebook and see that she is in a relationship with a dude who is enlisted in the army, and by information on his page, I find out he is doing service in Iraq. A few weeks later, I see they're engaged on Facebook, and she has up all these pictures of her ring and such with mad statuses about how in love they are and whatnot. So I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. A couple weeks later, my friend Katie, who is good friends with one of Katie's close friends, calls me freaking out. Turns out Katie had taken the information off a family-made memorial website about a deceased young man who died while doing service in Iraq, made him a Facebook page, and told everyone she was dating him long distance. Even though no one she knew had ever met him, I guess the family somehow found the Facebook online and exposed her. What a nut. TLDR girl takes the identity of a dead army guy, makes him a Facebook, tells everyone she is dating him. Guy's family finds out and exposes her. Story 42. So this insanity happened to a friend of mine, and I was collateral damage. I worked at a computer store, and he was a very smart person. He had this hot Korean girlfriend he'd bring around to the store, and as the resident cute gay dude, she loved me. We all used to hang out, go to lavish dinners, go drinking, etc., all on her dime. She apparently came from big-time Korean money and loved to be generous with her friends. It even escalated to the point where she went to Barney's and bought me a pair of Prada shoes just because. Another time she took me to an all-you-can-eat Korean barbecue joint for lunch when I got dumped. Then as she dropped me off, she handed me a brand new iPod Touch in a box. No biggie. Whenever there was an issue with payment, happened once or twice, she would say my wealth manager Bob is an idiot and forgot to pay off my card. Hey, Ray's a different one. Not too weird. Never thought much about it. I quit working there and we all drifted apart. Cut to 6 months later, I get a call from my friend and former coworker. He said, sit down. This is crazy. She did indeed come from big-time Korean money, but she got disowned when she was in college. She had a raging coke habit. Dad found out. She was cut out of the family completely. So she married a rich guy named Bob, purely for his money. The same wealth manager she claimed was an idiot. He had her on allowance, which explains the weird non-functional credit card situations. She was having an affair with my friend, had an apartment, dogs, etc. She was even planning a wedding, total double life. He was devastated, understandably, and that's when I knew I had to get the out of LA.